Here, welcome to a Thursday edition of the Garden Report leading up to Celtics Heat tonight. Celtics going to get a look at the new-look Miami team that dropped their first game with Terry Rozier. Pretty sloppy effort last night, Josue from them against Memphis. So
terrible trade. They should have done it.
We'll get into that. We'll get into first the Bucks and the drama of this week. Absolutely unbelievable, Josue. I don't think I've ever seen a story quite like this. I know
that makes two of us for sure, man. Mid-season like this, especially with this record, I've never seen it.
I know there's a few cases historically. Probably the most recent one's John Beeline in Cleveland when they put in JB Bickerstaff for him, I believe, a couple of years ago. But this is much different. A championship contending team, one that had its stars seemingly approve a hire months earlier and completely turn on the situation within 41 games here. And I knew right away, Josue, when they fired him, I was like, they must have someone they know that they like here. But I didn't expect Doc Rivers to come down from the booth and take this team over. And it's going to be interesting to see. I'm thrilled Doc's back in the league. I think he needs to be in the league.
Yeah, I guess he was speaking through the side door of Milwaukee, the practice facility, this consultant job, this like under the table job no one really knew about until now.
Like Jeff Van Gundy with the Celtics. And apparently Jeff Van Gundy was a candidate for this job, but it seems like all along if Doc was going to accept it, they were going with him.
Yeah, I feel like Jeff Van Gundy his name's gonna be thrown in there, especially because he's kind of somewhat back in the league with his work with the Celtics and with everything going on in Milwaukee. They're looking for a veteran coach, right? Someone that's been through it, someone that's obviously won, and also just someone that can help this roster in finding its defensive identity of last year, which is going to be difficult to do without Drew Holiday, without the same roster, right? But the defense just hasn't been the same this year, and it's obviously the biggest thing that sticks out about what's been going on, about what's wrong about this Milwaukee Bucks team. But I also think the second thing is you want to bring a veteran coach here just to sort of calm everyone down. I feel like from what I've been gathering from information from NBA Scout and other analysts who have been close to the situation, they're telling me that some of it is also arguing amongst the players. Now, in terms of Dame and Giannis, it's been outside of that. I don't know if guys are arguing or they just disagree after games or whatnot, but you look at some of these games also, and yeah, the record is impressive, but Giannis and Dame had to really bail these guys out in the fourth quarter a handful of times this season, especially recently against the Detroit Pistons, which stood out as well. And then you just looked at the overall vibe between Giannis and Adrian Griffin. I mean, between seeing Giannis sub himself back into a game or at least contest why he's being subbed out and getting that privilege right away. I just think that when you see something like that for a head coach in his first season, it's just not. It looks like he doesn't have a whole lot of control, and I felt like that little by little he was starting to lose this team's belief in him.
Yeah, and that's happened multiple times. You stack up all the incidents. Whether it's the most recent example of that happened against the Celtics, which I didn't remember initially. Him staying in the game despite Griffin wanting to sub him out. He didn't comment on that after the game in the locker room. He was asked to and just said no. And he was pretty tense after that game in a way I've never really seen before. Him and Thanasis going back and forth in Greek, sounding pretty angry in the locker room after that game, just arguing essentially with reporters in there. And then you had an incident where Bobby Portis apparently had a very animated display in the locker room. I think Chris Haynes reported that at the time.
And he threw a couple strays too, just the way that things are different now and the game planning and stuff. So obviously he's talking about Adrian Griffin when you say stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and even Griffin, just in the little we've seen of him, and I was at Milwaukee for that last game. The Celtics lost badly on the road.
Yeah, that was his best win, Bobby. You got to see that.
They didn't seem to be a ton to him as a coach. And I know he tried to bring over that Raptors defensive system from Nick Nurse, and the players kind of resisted that a little bit, and they ended up switching back to more of the Budenholzer scheme. But neither have gone smoothly here. You can point to the trade, which I'm sure has had a big impact on them. And Grayson Allen, has actually played pretty well in Phoenix. So that's a real loss. Malik Beasley's not quite the same player. So Doc's dealing with the same personnel Griffin did here and the same restraints. And even though I do think Doc's a better coach than people give him credit for, like some of the playoff and just things that get thrown against him at this point, I think are just a little bit overblown. He had all of his teams, even though they were very talented rosters, in the top of their conferences, across all his stops so far. So that's where he can expect to put this team, which is going to be much better than where they were. As you mentioned, great record, but shaky results. 18-6 in crunch time, as you mentioned. Um, bolstering their record quite a bit right now. And if a few of those went the other way, they'd be sliding down the East in a big way. So they really haven't played well right now. I know he's thinking of bringing in Dave Yeager, according to reports, who's a pretty experienced coach. Maybe bringing in a defensive specialist of some sort. So we'll see how this shapes out here. There's no doubt, Josue, that this team is going to be in a better spot under Doc.
Yeah.
But how much better?
Right. Just how much better, right? Because again, look at the record. I mean, I just think again, this is more of an overall vibe type of move where one, the defense just isn't up to par with what they've been. It's just their standards at this point. I mean, this is a team that won the championship a few years ago. Giannis has been
Number one defense last
number
year.
one defense last year, and it still wasn't enough. So you can imagine how Giannis feels. Even with the record, he's like, man, he knows that it's all about what this team wants to do in June, right? Can you make it to June? And he doesn't feel comfortable. I mean, people can say, oh, well, he must be looking at the way the Celtics be. Maybe, but I just think overall, he's not feeling this is a championship run. And because he's been there before and because he's made so many deep playoff runs, I think he's just trying to trust his instincts right now. This whole thing really started with, in terms of Giannis and this, I feel like he has a way more control with how things are run in Milwaukee than most superstars. And I feel like it was when he made the comments about saying that if he can't win a championship in Milwaukee, he would do it somewhere else. And I think that really triggered the team to focus on what he wanted most. And whether it was getting a new coach and getting rid of Budenholzer, bringing in Adrian Griffin, the whole Terry Stotts thing I thought was interesting before the season even started. The clash that happened between Adrian Griffin and Stotts. I mean, I think it gave the team sort of a look at the coach and his demeanor, obviously one thing, but also, I think they had high expectations, and I think the defensive end, they weren't going to be the same team they were last year. They couldn't. I mean, look at the personnel. I mean, you can point at John Horst as well, the GM, and saying, well, what happened with the roster? Letting Grayson Allen go, and the scout mentioned Javon Carter, who he believes is a solid backup.
He was a good piece for them.
Yeah,
campaign a major downgrade from Javon Carter for sure.
Right. So, I mean, it's a little bit of both. This isn't just, Adrian Griffin couldn't get these guys to play defense at a high level. I mean, you look at the personnel, and like you mentioned, Bobby, bringing in that or trying to assert that Toronto Raptors defense. You don't have Toronto Raptors personnel. Like you need a stronger defenders in the backcourt. Dame's been a turnstile. Malik Beasley, like you said, he's not the same, and he's not a really a great on-ball defender. So they just had a couple holes in there. And listen, I don't think this is the end as well. I mean, Doc Rivers becoming the head coach is a big change, but it wouldn't surprise me if these guys try to go out there and get a wing. Try to get one of these players that could be available.
Yeah, and they have a little bit more flexibility with that than I realized. I know Jake Fisher wrote about it yesterday, potential names they could pursue. On the less likely side, Alex Caruso and DeJounte Murray, who they're both interested in, but are commanding multiple first-round picks that the Bucks don't have right now. So a more likely scenario, at least right now, wings that bring some defense, as you mentioned, Matisse Thybulle, who I'm not even going to go there. But
What? Go ahead, say it. What's wrong with Thybulle?
So he played under
thing? Oh yeah,
he played under Doc in Philly, and he never played.
Yeah.
So there might be an odd fit there. I don't know if that report's true, so I'm not going to go with that. But that was a scenario in Philly where he wasn't playing much there under Doc. So
gotcha.
I don't know if he has a no trade. He might with the contract there, signing an offer sheet or whatever it was. But yeah, the Blazers matched his offer sheet, so they can't trade him for a year, I believe. So unless he approves. So that's another layer there of difficulty if they're going to try and go get a guy like that. And then you hear PJ Tucker, who's really good for this team, won the championship here, played with Giannis. Probably wouldn't cost much. I don't know if the Clippers want to move on from him, even though they're not playing him much. Yeah. He doesn't bring any offense to the table at all at this point. When he's playing, he's not even shooting. So that's a difficulty if you're going to try to integrate him into your regular lineups. But he does bring some toughness and defense and all the rest. And they do need guys, Josue, let's be real, to stay in front of Jason Tatum and Jaylen
Yeah.
Brown. They really don't have those guys right now unless you're going to put Giannis on one of them. And Middleton, not quite the same guy right now. So this still isn't a team that scares you. If they pull a rabbit out of their hat here and go get a DeJounte Murray or Alex Caruso type, then you're looking at this team and you're a lot more fearful. But right now, despite Doc, I think being an improvement, despite this being a little bit of a wake-up call for the team, I'm sure, and they did beat the Cavs pretty handily last night, I don't know if this team's on Boston's level in terms of depth, in terms of versatility, starting lineup, all the rest. And Giannis and Dame, if they can get those two playing together, which they really haven't done to start their first season together here, that's compelling. And obviously, I respect Giannis in a manner where he could push a series with the Celtics 6-7 games. But the defensive holes right now are just too big, and it's got to be tough for Doc to come in here and try to fix that on the fly. No practice time, maybe an assistant or two that's coming in with him, but trying to step into a new staff. Maybe there's some friction there. This is a very difficult situation, and it's hard for me to imagine that this is just going to turn their season around.
Yeah, same, Bobby. But it's weird because it's like turning around. They got this the three-way tie for second. The best record in the NBA. So
their offense is dynamic. There's no doubt about it. And Lillard's been the real deal in that sense.
Right. And I think when you bring in someone like Doc, maybe this is something that we look back and say, oh, that was that set them up for next season. Maybe they get back to the finals next year, or between Doc changing things up now and an off season, they can fix the roster to the way tailor made for Doc, which is something that I think would help as well. But yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. But if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you understand why you're doing this. You're looking long term. You're making sure that the team is happy with who's coaching. That's obviously very important. And you want to fix whatever's going on. In terms of like this disconnect and people. If this stuff is if it's true, these reports about guys not getting along and there's some sort of a chemistry issue, then I think Doc is the guy who you call. I think you take a chance on Doc because of his track record, obviously, but also just how he's been able to connect with players and get the most out of them. I think he's one of those guys. He's a motivator. He's a coach that can really get guys to hustle, to work hard. I mean, you ask me, he had a lot to do with helping Embiid become an MVP. I think a lot of what happened in Philly was just organizations just grew impatient. They had the Celtics against the ropes. People forget that. It's easy to forget because you look at the Celtics and what happened in the Eastern Conference Finals, but the Philadelphia Sixers had a 3-2 lead. The Celtics came back and won Game 7 and all that, but Doc is a big reason why you got there, and I think Joel Embiid would agree with that.
That's the Doc debate, right? He's put his teams in those positions. 2010, the lead they had over the Rockets, the Clippers that year, probably their best chance to win a finals. They blew that. They've blown a lot of leads teams have under Doc Rivers, and how much of that is his? He obviously went on that famous tirade about this guy was hurt and that guy was hurt. This team wasn't good.
Yeah, he was like trying to save himself. Yeah.
And all of it's valid, right? And every situation's different. This could be the most talented team he's ever coached in terms of top-end talent here. But he's got to bring some ideas and implement them and adjust come playoff time, because that's probably the biggest knock on him are the adjustments right now, going head-to-head with a team. Obviously, when the Celtics went double big late in that series, it shut down Philly's offense almost completely, and that was the end of them. So interpersonal stuff too, I'm sure there's some lessons learned from Harden and the way that thing broke down late. But as you said, Josue, he did have him playing at a high level throughout the year, sacrificing, and Embiid playing at an MVP level. So I think there's some truth to both sides. I think Doc's a good coach. I do think he has some deficiencies, though, that might not make him the solution to the problems here. In terms of the odd movements,
I was just gonna say though, if you're Doc though, you got to be pumped up for this, man. Like obviously, not only do you coach an MVP and Giannis Antetokounmpo, but he's a point guard. You got to remember that. He's excited about coaching Damian Lillard. I think this is the only situation over the summer where I was like, Doc would love that job. I couldn't see any other team where he's like, oh, okay, yeah, sign me up. Like this is that one. This is the one. And it probably probably go out on a limb and say he's going to be the last one. Honestly, because we've seen Doc before say like he's exhausted and he would just wants to take time off, and like you mentioned at the top, he seemed very comfortable in the broadcast booth where people forget he was there about 20 plus years ago before he took the Celtics job. So for one season, but he loved it and he always said nothing but good things about it. So I think that's still part of his future, his life after coaching. But this probably is his last stint, and whether it's a couple seasons or extends longer than that, we'll have to wait and see.
And of course, our official sports wagering partner is FanDuel. This is wrong right here, but get $150 in bonus bets. That's the offer right now when you bet $5 at FanDuel.com/Boston. The app's easy to use and you get paid instantly. It's a great experience. Probably my favorite sports betting app I've used. And right now, there's a ton to be interested in. Of course, what we're talking about, Bucks making a move. They are now plus 210. Right behind the Celtics is East favorites. Celtics plus 145 in the driver's seat. Heat move up to plus 1,100 with the Terry Rozier trade up above the Knicks and the Pacers, which is about where I have them too. I think probably where they land. We're going to talk about that in just a second ahead of the Heat game tonight. And of course, finals odds, Celtics plus 300, the favorites. Quite a bit ahead of the Nuggets, who did beat them last week at plus 430, plus 480, the Bucks, and plus 850, Clippers. Come a long way since that Harden trade. Sixers, Rivers' former team, 1,100. Suns, still at 1,300 despite their issues. So head over to FanDuel.com. Lots of football this weekend, too. It's Championship Sunday. Great time to get $150 in bonus bets to use on player props, same game parlays, whatever you like. And, of course, all futures and championship odds available right now as well. Just go check them out. Go check out the app. And again, if you're signing up for the first time, 21 plus and in mass, use FanDuel.com/Boston for $150 in bonus bets when you bet $5. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. Of course, bonus bets are non-withdrawable and expire within 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com and check out Gambling Helpline ma.org 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. GameSenseMA.com. Play it smart from the start. 1-800-GAM-1234. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. All right, Terry Rozier, Josue. I don't know if we haven't talked about.
We haven't, man. Rose, so happy for him.
Yeah, great fit. I know Jalen was talking at Celtics practice yesterday and saying, he lives in Miami, so this is great. It's a great fit.
He lives in Miami. That's funny. I didn't know that. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but
I don't know if he means he lives there or he's there all the time. But
oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah. That's probably what he meant. That's probably what he meant.
So it's a good fit. I think he's a good two-guard combination for Jimmy Butler. He's pretty similar to Kyle Lowry when you think about it. Shorter guard who has some burst and pull-up ability. But just at an earlier stage of his career, yeah. So Terry's in his prime right now. He's playing the best basketball of his career. He had a rocky debut tonight. I know he started last night. I know he started 1 of 5 from the field, and just sort of seemed out of sync. Spoelstra kind of chalked that up to it just being his first game, but he was also pretty adamant that this team's in a little bit of a lull right now. So they're going to need this Rozier burst. Lowry, despite his limitations, was an important part of their rotation. And Rozier comes in last night, shoots 3 of 11, 1 of 5 from 3, 9 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. So a little bit of a rocky debut, but he showed some chemistry playing alongside Tyler Hero, a little bit of a two-man game there. Came off the bench. I don't know if that's going to be how they ultimately use him. I'd imagine he'll start and maybe put Hero back in that 6-man role where he thrived. But does this close the gap with the Celtics at all here, if there was any with Miami? Because obviously Miami beat them last year.
Yeah, right. I'm not quite sure it does, but it certainly makes them better. I mean, you improve the backcourt, and like you said, you assuming he's going to start. He's just getting his feet wet in Miami right now, so he didn't start in his debut. But yeah, I think he starts, and I think it would be natural for these guys to have Tyler Hero come off the bench in that 6-man role. I mean, with Rozier, I just love the thought of seeing him back in the playoffs. High-level basketball, Miami Heat culture. I think he fits in great with that. He shows you signs, a lot of signs this year when LaMelo Ball went down of cleaning up his his ability as a facilitator, right? And what I mean by that is you didn't know on certain nights who you were going to get. Sometimes he was just throwing the ball around to, it would end up in the third row. There's a lot of turnovers, sloppy. And I feel like this year he really cleaned it up. He's averaging a career high in assists, 6.6 assists a night. 20 plus games. He did it without LaMelo Ball, which I think speaks volumes for a guy who is essentially the focal point of that offense, a lot of the time. And he was still able to thrive as a scorer, facilitator, and he gave a little bit of defense as well. I know Celtics fans will remember those steals that he would do sometimes, every once in a while. I feel like he's improved as a defender in a sense of as an off-ball defender, I should say. He still has a lot of work on that side, but I'm excited again to see what he looks like in this culture. A few months with Eric Spoelstra and the Heat going into the playoffs, I'm sure he'll be fine. I really do. I really do believe that he's going to thrive in this situation. I think the Heat are going to love Terry Rozier as a starting point guard.
Yeah, definitely. And this is just the latest in a line of moves here across the East.
And they're another one to keep an eye out for, Bobby. They're not done as well. It really wouldn't shock me if they get one of these buyout guys or someone that's available for the trade deadline.
Yeah, and our guy Kelly Olynyk that we keep kicking around.
That's the one I have in mind. Honestly, I think it makes the most sense. He would really just help solidify that offense and just. Yeah, man, they could get that momentum right back going into the playoff. I mean, that's the thing. To answer you, to go back to your question about closing the gap, it's like it's way too early because this is not Miami's style, right? They closed the gap like right before the playoffs started. Like, oh man, like look at them. I mean, they weren't supposed to make it. They made it as a playing team. And they went all the way to the final. So I just think that's something that you're always going to have in the back of your mind, especially when you're making moves like this, lining your ducks up in a row. And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, you're like, oh, Heat's one of the favorites to win it all.
Yeah, and it's interesting because teams are loading up around the East. And as you mentioned, they're not done. The Heat could go and make an additional move here. The picks that they gave up in this deal, 2027 and could be 2028 if it doesn't convey, that ties up multiple years again for them. So it's going to be tricky for them to trade first.
Right.
I know they owe the Thunder a pick as well down the line here. So they could trade some pick swaps maybe, and second rounders certainly a more powerful tool than ever. The Bucks are certainly floating around their number 35 pick right now. And one of the trades recently involved the number 31 going out. So you got Rozier to the Heat. You got OG Anunoby. I think that was it going to the Knicks for the number 31 pick right now. And then you have Pascal Siakam going to the Pacers. So teams around the East are loading up right now. All of them have played the Celtics tough in recent years here. And the Celtics are pretty limited in what they can do. They could try to get in on one of these buyout guys, the lower cost ones. I know there's still some interest in adding someone to the Grant Williams TPE, maybe a bench player who can fill in certain spots. But there's going to be nothing significant for the Celtics coming here. So for them, it's just going to be about continuing to do what they've done. And that's what we're going to see tonight. Can Porzingis solve this zone that Miami will throw at you sometimes? Can Jalen and Jason continue to play balanced and playmaking basketball as they've done in spots this year, efficient basketball involved, getting off the ball, getting teammates involved. Drew Holiday, like you're going to see him against Bam. There's a lot of questions here in terms of the Celtics team and their rotations, their defense, their defensive alignment, because I don't think you're going to see Rozier, Siakam, OG level reinforcements for the Celtics team, Josue.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the move they made during the offseason, and I always thought of what happened in that Eastern Conference Finals matchup, the things that were missing. And Porzingis and Drew Holiday, like, they solve all of the issues. if you were to insert them into that series last year, in Game 7 at least, even if Tatum goes down, he got a shot. But, I mean, that's what Brad Stevens has been doing year after year, just trying to plug holes that he's seen from their team being eliminated, seeing the Celtics being eliminated, seeing what they need. And he essentially did that. And I think a lot of that was based off of what he saw throughout what transpired throughout that best of 7 series, the good and the bad, what was missing. And I think Porzingis is a big part of that. We loved Robert Williams, right? We were all big fans of his progression, his growth, what he meant to the defense, the lobs, all that. But they having someone like Porzingis who can extend his shot out to the perimeter changes things. Obviously, you didn't have someone like that, outside of Al Horford in that series, and a solid passer, and also another rim protector who essentially will disrupt things. It can switch, 1 through 5 if he has to. So I think the Miami Heat are going to make you do that a lot, and it's going to be interesting to see how Porzingis responds to that, especially tonight with the new. With Terry Rozier in the mix going up against his former team. I think it's going to be a fun one.
Definitely. And let's see. Do we have an injury report yet? We should by this point here. Let's see if the Heat have put theirs out. Celtics, of course, coming into this game healthy. The Heat list Jaime Jaquez as out, who's been helpful for them. I know Kevin Love left the game last night with an illness. He is questionable. And Haywood Highsmith is back from a foot strain. So no injuries on the Celtics side, just Jaime Jaquez, maybe Kevin Love missing on that Miami side. So relatively healthy, even matchup here tonight. Jimmy Butler's going to go. Terry Rozier will play his second game with the Heat here. So much different dynamic than a year ago. Hero was down for that series. You had no Porzingis and Holiday on that Boston side. Guys were banged up toward the end of that series. So another look at this budding rivalry where home opener went right down the wire. I know Porzingis was great in that game. O'Shea Brissett gave them a little something in that game. He's back tonight after missing that Dallas game. It is going to be a fun one, Josue. But when you look at these teams around the East, I know we asked Joe Mazzulla after the Pacers got Pascal Siakam for some comment. He didn't want to give any at the time, but now after a couple moves around the East here, he did talk to NBC Sports Boston, everybody else down there in Miami. And this is what he had to say. We haven't won, so I don't know why anyone's competing with us. I think he was asked if teams are trying to catch up to them or, where that dynamic is.
Good
We
answer.
haven't won a championship since 2008. We're chasing people just as much as they're chasing us, which I like. That's what I was looking for, Josue, that day. Just some perspective on all these teams trying to load up to keep up with them. And as he's done all year, it's an inward focus, trying to keep this team consistent, locked into what they're trying to do, and winning night in and night out, which I think has kind of been the mark of their great start here.
Yeah, for sure. And very Greg Popovich of him, right? If Pop was one of those coaches, back in the day, what she was, right, before he won it all, like, it's like, yeah, we're playing well right now, but we haven't won anything, And I think what Mazzulla wants to keep in mind is that, like you said, they're focusing on themselves. Like, they're not going to look outside and say, oh, what are you guys trying to chase us? Or like, oh, we're going to be worried about trades happening and teams improving. So yeah, that's the attitude you're supposed to have. And I think that Joe Mazzulla answered that one perfectly. And that's one of those questions where when we're in the huddle, when we hear it, you're just like, oh, you know exactly how he's going to answer that. And his answer didn't surprise me. I mean, it's spot on. Celtics basketball, Mazzulla ball. That's it. That's right there. That's the attitude. Like, we can't focus or think about any other team situation. We're focused on us. And if they're chasing us, well, that's odd because we didn't even get to the finals last year. So yeah, well done. Well said, coach.
The Heat lose their first game with Rozier, Pascal Siakam now in a handful of games with the Pacers. Lost to Portland, Phoenix, and Denver. So they're now 0-3 with him in the lineup. He's averaging 17 points, 7 rebounds, 4.7 assists, shooting 50%. So playing well, but the Pacers have dropped some bad games. Some good teams there, Portland aside. And then you're looking at OG Anunoby, who's had a lot more success with the Knicks. I know they're coming up
I love that
next
trade,
month.
man. Love that trade for them.
Yeah, and they are now, with him in the lineup? Ooh, he's played a lot of games at this point. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 2 with OG Anunoby in the lineup. He is averaging 14.5 points, 5 rebounds, 1.4 steals per game, 1.3 blocks per game, shooting 40% from 3.
Balling. I'm telling you, man. Some
50%
players,
from
they
the
put that
field.
Knicks uniform on, and they're just like,
He is a Knick, right?
Yeah.
That was a great fit. And you know what? There, I know he got asked about it. Bruce Brown up in Toronto, potentially in play to add him, who's very Josh Hart-like, but I guess it's not bad having 2 Josh Harts or 2 Bruce Browns, however you want to look at that. That team, to me, Josue, if we're picking any of these ones here, and I've been a big Pacers fan this year, obviously you have to respect the Heat and what they've done. But given the upgrades they've made, given the upgrades they might still make, out of all the teams we're talking about here, and I know the Celtics have kind of had their numbers so far this year, I'm looking at the Knicks. If they get into a playoff series with that team, they're going down to New York in that environment, it could get a little dicey. You might have a 6-7 game series there against that defense and those playmakers. Jalen Brunson, who's known to slice up that drop
Oh yeah.
defense. That's the one I'm looking at. Which of these teams, or even the Bucks, if you want to throw them in with the coaching change now, are you looking at and saying they're a much bigger threat after the last week?
I mean, we have to wait and see what other moves are going to happen. But as of today, I'll probably go with the Bucks. I really do. I mean, I just think
you trust them.
Yeah, I do. I think the excitement around Doc Rivers and what's been going on and stuff. I don't know. I just think Doc is the kind of guy that could really. Doc's the kind of guy who I feel like could come into this situation and just grab everyone's attention and never lose it. You know, even until the end of the season. You know, I just think he's one of those. He's such a great motivator. And Giannis and Dame and these type of superstars, I think they fall into that. You know, I do. I think Giannis knows his stuff in the sense of NBA history, and he respects sort of the legends or the guys who've put a lot of time in. You know, reading his book a couple of years ago when he talked about the day he found out Jason Kidd got fired. I mean, he cried. He was so upset. He didn't understand that that happens a lot in this business, and I think it said a lot about who he is or what kind of heart he has, right? Also, well, one. But two, also who he is as a player. You know, I think he, if he really believes in a coach, he's gonna do anything it takes. You know, he's gonna make sure that everyone follows the same path. You know, he's such a good leader like that. So, yeah, I would say as of today, that's the biggest threat. Miami Heat, you're gonna wait and see because well, you can say the same thing about the Bucks, but I think Miami would make a bigger splash in the buyout market, and I know that they're not. I know right now because of the trade, they're underneath the second apron, but they're still a second apron team, so that does hurt them in a sense. But
yeah, they're limited. They can't. We've kicked them around, but they can't go out and get a Haley.
Even if it's like I don't know, man, like a Linux or someone. I don't know. We'll see. I just think they get someone like that.
And there's someone who will make use of those guys. Those guys don't always make an impact, but if anyone's going to make it happen,
right,
it's them.
Right.
This was Giannis, similar to what you were saying there, Josue. At the end of the day, I trust ownership's decision, trust the front office. They've never done me wrong. Create a great atmosphere, great culture.
No, I'm just kidding.
So that's what I'm saying. He's got to take some responsibility here for what's gone on. I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me that he's had an outsized voice in all of this.
For sure.
And
I mean, he had to have.
To just act the next day like, oh, ownership went and did this on their own and it caught us all off guard, to me is just not the kind of leadership you're looking for. And I love Giannis. I trust his ability to lead this team deep and win a championship. But this dysfunction and turnover and chaos here, it goes back to your best player. And let's be real to wrap this up here, Josue. They probably should have kept Budenholzer.
Yeah,
Giannis gets hurt round one.
That's what it really goes back to, man. Like, and again, I feel like that had a lot to do with Giannis, and
Giannis was hurt round one, and you lose a tough series. Like, they overreacted. So, and Bud wasn't the best. He had his limitations, but you had Charles Lee alongside him, who was a very good assistant, a whole staff of guys there who were very strong championship level coaches. You could have added to that. Maybe, I don't know, could you have brought Adrian Griffin in over as an assistant from Toronto? I don't know. But this whole season has just been very dysfunctional so far. And I'm not one of the people who says, oh, they should have kept Drew and not done that Lillard deal. But I get why people might say that, given that you would have kept Allen and everything else. It's tough. I probably still do the Lillard trade. But looking back on it, they probably should have kept Bud.
Yeah, that's where I agree with that for sure. The Lillard trade, I don't see a situation where Giannis just says, you know what, let's just stick with what we got. I mean, he wanted to play with Dame. It's just plain and simple. He's he said it in the past. He's just a big fan, and coming off of a first round knockout, sure, you bring up the idea, he's going to say, yeah, let's do it. So I don't think in doing that, you didn't replace what was missing on the defensive side. And I think again, I'm going to go back to that because I don't think Giannis would ever go out and say, oh, well, management should have got a better roster. But it's like, hey, if you're calling the shots here, this is what you asked for, right? And you got it. And I just think with his former coach out of the picture, you kind of had to get this one right. Maybe why not call Doc during the offseason, or why not find out what's best for this team, but what's actually best for the team, not what's absolutely best for Giannis. But hey, you give someone that much power and you give him that much say, this stuff's going to happen. And sometimes you're going to get it right and sometimes you're not. But in this one, I think you did the right thing because of the way the team was sort of chemistry's been splintered. You got guys going to practice just to sort of observe Adrian Griffin. I mean, that's never good, right? When the principal goes to check on how the teachers how methods are with the students, it's like, oh shit, like what did you do, Mr. Johnson? Like, damn, you got the principal in here. Like, so yeah, I mean, they got it right, but I'm with you. Like, why not just keep Budenholzer for at least another year? You weren't healthy, but I just think Giannis never envisioned the Bucks losing in the first round. I just think he panicked, he freaked, whatever you want to call it, but the Bucks responded to that energy. And this is what happened. You got to
yeah. I don't think the team wanted to fire Bud especially after going through some personal stuff at the time.
Right. But it's like the pressure with Giannis and then going on the podcast and saying what he said, like that stuff. You if you're Giannis, you've been in the league long enough where you say a quote like that, it's gonna make headlines and it's gonna get back to the front office and it's gonna stir things up. So that type of stuff is calculated, if you ask me. I don't think it's one of those things where like, he was just, oh, I was opening up and I just said, hey, if the Celtics called, I would jump in a second. He didn't say that, but he pretty much was like, if there's a better situation for me, then I'm doing it. I already won one here. Sort of like, hey, I got it done for you guys already. I want to keep doing this. And I want to do this with or without you. So that's when everything sort of switched up after that.
Yeah. He didn't want to talk about failure after the season again.
Right.
He did last year. Do the Celtics need to make a move now?
Nah. I mean,
you're standing pat with this team?
Don't touch the top 6, top 7 or whatever. I mean, I just think if the Celtics do make a trade before the deadline, it'll be an insurance policy, a third string guy. So
yeah, I think they need that. So we'll see. John Conchar, still my name. There's some others floating around out there. Najee Marshall's one that popped up that I talked about on the radio with Joe Murray, Josue.
On 98.5, yeah. Here's some of that. You go, Bobby.
I put that up on All Access if you want to go check that out. We kicked around some Celtics trade targets. He asked me, Josue, very 98.5 question. If the Celtics were in this spot, would they have done that to Joe Mazzulla?
I don't think so. What do you think?
No, I think they would have been patient.
Yeah.
Look how last year went.
They're more of an off season. Like, hey, we'll do what we got to do when the season's over. So
yeah. All right, that's it for now. We are back tonight. Celtics Heat 7:30. Check that out. All of us will be here talking about that game. Some of this stuff too. Crazy week in the NBA.
Yeah,
still
man.
A couple weeks.
Crazy stuff. Check out my Substack. It's on my Twitter. Got the link up there.
All right, at Joe_Sway. Go check that out. And CLNSmedia.com, of course, for all our coverage of this NBA mid-season point. Celtics Heat tonight. They're back Saturday against the Clippers, so we'll be there for that. And big homestand ahead after that. So busy stretch coming up for the Celtics, and tonight's a big one. I'm Bobby Manning, Josue Pavon. Thanks for joining us midday here on the Garden.